doing? Hey guys, Jason Clemons and BEX here. We're going live from Schenectady, New York. Face masks, PPE, and each other.
It's been a while since we've been together, so we just want to thank everybody for tuning in and checking out the stuff that we have to offer. We just want to give some salon reality to what's been going on lately. Obviously, we know that a lot of people have grown out their hair over this COVID pandemic, the little minor shutdown that we've had. And we're going to just talk about how to do a long shag, something that people are asking for right now. They're missing that movement in their hair. They're missing that enjoyment, that excitement that they used to have. And with 6 months or so of growing out, or 3 months of growing out, or 7 months of growing out if you live in California, we know that everyone is really going through this together, and we just want to bring back some excitement back into the salon and keeping everyone safe as well. So.
Yeah, and with the shag too, it's a great haircut to give your guests, since they might be going another 3 to 4 months without getting their haircut. Hopefully, everything stays open and ready for the professionals, but just in case you want to prepare your guests with a little bit of extra length to get them through whatever they might need to get through.
So also, just so you know, we're going to be doing this from multiple camera angles as well. So if you're following me on Instagram Live, I can see you guys from here, and you'll actually witness us once we start to cut on the mannequin. And then from Becca's point of view, we're going to be working from Beauty by BEX, right?
Yeah, or BEX Cleary.
Or BEX Cleary. So we're using multiple channels to do this so that we can reach a multitude of people. We're also going to be recording this so that we can upload some work later, so that if you didn't get to see it live, you get to see it as a recorded form, and then you can get up close and personal with some of the techniques that we'll be using.
And I'll be checking on all of the channels to see if anyone has any questions and wants to communicate with us on, some of the things that you guys might be dealing with behind the chair, whether that be, just relating to people that have lost their jobs or any hardships that they've lost maybe from COVID. I know that sometimes we're the first person that they would come see before they went to go see a therapist. So I think it's important to address that aspect as well, since we're both salon owners, so we've been seeing it and helping each other from a distance until today.
Absolutely.
Kind of get through that. So I knew Jason was going to be here, so I kind of had that idea to really share with our community and kind of bring everybody together. So if anyone has any questions, I'm going to be popping in to answer any of those questions and take a look at everything. Thank you guys all for joining.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, just make sure that you put them in the comments, and we'll try to respond. Some of them will try to respond live, and others will also get back to you. We'll wave to everybody here. Here's BEX. So again, we're doing this from multiple camera angles. We're also recording it from the back side so that we try to get all angles, and we'll congeal all this stuff later so that you get the best of both worlds. Again, we're going to be doing a long shag, which is interpreted so many different ways. If you just Google long shag haircut, you're going to see thousands of different interpretations, but that's what the reality is in our salons, is our guests walk into the salons and they really don't have a true clue what they want. They have 500 different pictures. They pinned and they tag friends. They have Pinterest tags that they have categories of all these haircuts that they're looking for. We just have to be able to interpret how we actually put those together and make it the best for them. They're not going to ever get the perfect, exact same haircut that they see on another model. But what you can do is give them the perfect look for them. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is interpret how you get those looks. So if you just go right now and you Google long shag haircut, you're going to see a bunch of different versions. We're just going to show you some multiple techniques. And with 2 of us working on one mannequin, you'll be able to see that we'll get a beautiful look at the end of this. and 2 people put their hands in it at the same time. So it's kind of a hybrid thing, and that's what's happening now too. Is we're doing hybrid education where part of it's virtual, part of it's live. We have to make sure that we hit people at all different angles and all different aspects. So hope you guys enjoy it.
Yay. Sounds good. Jason's gonna kick it off. I think since we're communicating, we can stay Jason on from 6 feet away. Without masks, obviously, you can hear a little bit better when our masks are off. Because I know it's hard in the salon to hear me with all the PPE on, and if you're already soft-spoken, this can be really hard, or anyone that needs to read lips, it can be really hard to understand what people are saying right now. So we'll take turns taking off our masks so you can see what we really look like.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by talking about the different areas of the head so that we can break this haircut down so you can see exactly where you need to be, your body position. I happen to be left-handed. Bex happens to be right-handed, so we're going to be doing this from 2 opposite sides, but we have the same mindset. We just speak a different language. So you're going to hear some terms that come out of my mouth that are different than what you'll hear out of Bex's mouth. We know the same things, but we just speak a different language. So hopefully you can understand, and we'll again answer any of those questions when we get to the end of the haircut or during the haircut. I'm going to start off by sectioning our beautiful mannequin here.
This is Lindsay.
This is Lindsay. So one of the most important things is to understand when sectioning off a mannequin or sectioning off a model is that you keep in mind where natural disconnection takes place. And I speak about this a lot because I do a lot of men's haircutting and a lot of short women's haircuts and also a lot of long haircuts. And you have to understand that there are natural disconnections in the hair. And that's one of the reasons why almost all of us as hairdressers are comfortable. And I'm going to go ahead and take off my mask.
Ooh.
I can finally breathe. So we're all very comfortable with cutting bangs or cutting a fringe. And why is that? The only reason that we're very comfortable is because it's a natural disconnection. Our hairline starts, well, not my hairline, but most people's hairlines start here in the front and it goes back to a recession area. That recession area is a natural disconnection. It disconnects the top from the mid and from the bottom. I like to separate those into 3 different areas. I call this the weight of the hair because that's where most of the hair gets heavy. Most of your guests will walk into the salon and they'll say, oh, my hair is heavy. Well, they're typically talking about the top. They're not talking about the bottom. It might hang down to the bottom, but it comes from the top. So when we speak about that, I like to call that the weight of the hair. Then right beneath that is the width of the hair. It's the widest portion of the head. It encompasses where the occipital bone is, where the parietal ridge is. We need to make sure that we understand those natural disconnections. When you see a typical long layer, what you'll notice is that there is no concern about these natural disconnections. There's only concern about how do you want your layers. You want long layers, you want short layers, you want 5 layers, you want 6 layers, like they come in a 6-pack. We want to make sure that people understand that it's not about how many layers you put in the hair. It's about how they're connected, where you understand your body position. So it's really important that we know our body position and understand where we need to dissect this haircut so that we can recreate it. It's the hardest thing for hairdressers to do is recreate their work because we're all artists. When we go into a situation where we're thinking of it as an artist, we never recreate it. A masterpiece can only be done once because once that masterpiece is done, and Bex, if you ever get the opportunity to see any of our other live stuff in here, you'll notice that there's artwork all over in the salon. And it's beautiful artwork from some sculptors, there's some painters, and in every single one of these, it's all unique. And that uniqueness really comes from a person's mind. It comes from their artist's eye. Well, we want to be able to recreate that work because we're hairdressers, so we need to create some architecture. So architecture needs to talk about these points on the head, and it's really important that we think about those areas. Can I get a couple of clips?
Yeah, of course. They're in my sanitized drawer.
Perfect place for them to be. Okay, so what I've done is I've subsectioned the weight from the width and the length of the hair, and I'm also going to subsection the back of the weight, because this hair in the back is going to fall separately. Thank you so much. It's going to fall separately from all the weight in the front. So I'm going to keep those two areas separate. It's the easiest way to follow your guide is by making sure that you're only taking one step at a time. Even if you don't, if you're not a fan of clipping things off, a lot of times I work in the salon at salon speed. So I will actually go in and do condensed cutting, and that means that I'm going to take smaller or take larger sections so that I can get done with an area so that I can finish on the refinement later. There's a wet relationship and a dry relationship with most haircuts, and that wet relationship is stamping in a shape. And then the dry relationship is going in and refining everything. And you'll see this a lot when you watch videos, but most artists don't tell you why they're doing those two things.
Yeah, I love that you just described it as a relationship. I was just talking earlier about how we, will establish that shape in a haircut, and then what makes the difference with the perimeter is usually the detailing that comes at the end. And two, there's so much more that still has to go into a haircut when it is dry. So I love that term though, the dry relationship and the wet relationship. And as far as architecture goes within a haircut, you still want to think about the foundations of where you're starting, how you're getting there, and then to make sure that you're still thinking in terms of geometry when it comes to the haircut,
So we're going to start out with a focal point. Let's start here right in the center. In the front, we know that we're going to do a little fun little fringe here. We might do a curtain bang. We might do something that's a little bit smaller. I came up with a technique a while ago of cutting a curtain bang that really falls into place just naturally, just by using a couple of real quick techniques with our shears, and we'll get to that as we get to the end. But I'm going to start by over-directing, elevating this top up. I'm going to use finger angle because that's the only way that you can actually change the amount or the length of a layer. And if we just pull this straight up and we cut from the top, we just direct it straight up and we cut it, we have a limited amount of layering that we can create, or a limited length of layering that we can create, and then you're limited by the length on the bottom. So we're going to talk about disconnection, but we're also going to talk about over direction and then finger angle. So if I over direct and I know that I want to maintain this length in the back, I want to make sure that I over direct forward. But if I over direct forward and I cut this and then I take everything from down below, I'm going to be cutting off the length in the front. So without thinking about the actual dissection of this haircut, I'm going to end up with a cookie cutter haircut, which gets very long in the back, but then there's nothing there. So we trick our guests and we throw it in front of them and we think, oh, look, it's still long. But really what they have is a mullet. Now, mullets are popular too, but that's not what we're trying to create. We're trying to create a long shag. And if there's something that you'll notice about all the shags that we're looking at in the Google search, when looking up on Pinterest, what you'll notice is that there's fullness in the bottom and there's fullness in the top. So we have to disconnect those two and focus on them separately. So I'm going to over direct, use finger angle. I'm going to take a clue, and that clue is going to be the bottom of the chin. Once I find out where that clue is, I'm going to cut from that moment and go straight up. And what this is going to do is it's going to leave this hair longer in the back and shorter in the front. But when you swing it down to the sides, it's going to be shorter towards the nose and longer towards the ear. Right? So it's doing two different things at one time. It's getting longer as it gets to the side, and it's getting longer towards the back. One is due to over direction towards the center. The other one's due to over direction and finger angle towards the front. If I keep that same position and I over direct everything to it, you're going to see an angle that follows the hairline. And if it follows the hairline, then it's going to shape or it's going to frame the face. And everyone always talks about, oh, can I get face framing layers? Can I get face framing layers? And a lot of times when they get face framing layers, we try to do our layers here in the front. And then we do the other side and we're kind of really crooked. We end up doing one side and it's very easy. And then we get to the other side and we have to like sit on their guest's lap. We get into awkward positions and now our body positions out and we do opposites. Now we have one side that looks really good for us and one side that doesn't look good for us. And then we have to go back and say, oh, well, you know, that's because your hair grows that way. And then we're lying to them. Instead of teaching them that I'm going to do something that's on both sides, I have to do it subtly different, but I'm going to get the same result if I think about it before I stamp in that shape. So I'm going to over direct on both sides towards the center. And because I'm using this top and I'm over directing to the same exact area, I can condense this. So this is a very fast way, and I just did two just so you could see my over direction and then my finger angle. But if I just did all of this at one time, it's because I'm using the same exact shape in the center. So if I turn a mannequin, what you'll notice is that I'm creating a triangle here. That's over direction from the side to the center. I'm going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. And what that's going to do is it's going to create it longer moving down this way. But it's also going to create it moving longer that way because this hair, when it falls back or styled back, it's longer in the back. Now, I just condensed that. So I'm going to do the same exact thing on the opposite side. The only difference is going to be is I'm going to comb on the side that I'm going to cut. So what you'll notice is that I did my weak side first. My weak side is going to be my left side because I'm left-handed. Now, I'm cutting from short to long. That's going to give you the easiest way to recreate it because wouldn't it look awkward if I came from this side and I tried to cut down this way? Right? I'd expose my midriff, which I don't like. So I have to make sure that I'm doing this thinking about my body position and the way that the hair is going to fall most naturally. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to condense this cutting, and I know that I'm condensing it because I'm gathering it all together. This is called a stationary guide. I cut that through. Again, I'm going to turn her around so that when I drop this, you'll be able to see that it's going to frame the face.
Beautiful.
So all I've done is I use over direction and finger angle to give me the maximum amount of fullness in this area because of over direction this way, because this hair lives down here. If I wanted to minimize the amount of fullness in here, what I would do is I would over direct back. If I over direct back, it gets skinny here. So I'm saving what I want to save here by over directing back. If I over direct forward, it's going to get heavier here, which is exactly what we're seeing in a lot of these shag looks. The next thing that I would do is I would add the back to this, and this is the back in the wave, but I don't want to just continue with that same exact angle, because if I continue with that same exact angle, we don't get the amount of layering that we want back here. So I'm going to change my angle of over direction, and I'm also going to change my finger angle. So my over direction in the back is going to be straight up. I'm going to take a clue from the center here. So now, here in the back, my angle is no longer going to be shifted this way because I would leave way too much in the back. I want to create some movement back here. The good thing about the back is it has twice as much weight as we do in the front. Because remember we talked about those natural disconnections? One of those disconnections is at the recession area. The next disconnection is right over the ear. And that's what separates the length from the width. The width in the sides is not, the sides in the front is not as heavy as it is in the back. So what you can do is you can create a shorter layer in the back rather than creating a shorter layer in the front. Even though most people think short layers means that the layers are short as in the overall where they start, typically when we say long layers, we mean the distance between the top layer and the bottom layer. That's where people get the misconception that there's, can I get 7 layers? Can I get 8 layers? Can I get the famous 3-layer haircut?
6 pack of layers, Jason.
Well, that 3-layer haircut is all just natural disconnection. It's the hairline that goes back and then it drops, and then you have another disconnection, which is actually not a layer, it's a disconnection from over the ear, and then you have the disconnection of the length. We're going to show you how to blend these all together. We're going to use multiple tools. We're starting out with our shears because that stamps in the most crisp line, and then we can go with some razors, we can use clippers, we can use a sharp stone if it's really popular.
What about fire, Jason? What do you think about fire?
You can use fire, I can't. I try to stay away from fire. My mom told me if you play with fire, you keep that.
Uh-oh. We don't want that.
All right, so I'm going to, again, direct this hair straight up. And I'm going to use my shears, and I have my guide right here in the front, and I'm just going to go straight across. If I go straight across, what I've done is I'm creating a flat layer. And this flat layer, when it falls back, it's going to create a little bit of fullness there because of what's underneath it. So when you hit the round of the head, what ends up happening is you get what's called an increased layer. Some people would call, there's so many different terminologies for it, but you have to pay attention to what's happening to the head. If the head is going this way and you cut it flat, once you hit the round of the head, you're actually creating a concave layer. That concave layer actually starts off full and then it becomes concave. The concavity is in here in the back. That's once we attach the weight to the width. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the weight first, and then I'm going to transfer, and she's going to be able to take you guys on the next journey, and that's attaching the next area. And I don't care how she does it, because I know she knows where she's at. She knows what I started. So she'll be able to take any method that she knows in her arsenal. We're all dangerous if we have the proper tools and we have the proper education. We understand each other. I know that I can pass off a haircut and walk away, go get some coffee, go get some food or anything. And I know that I can come back and she's going to have that vision in her head as well as I did. So we're going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to take the left side. I'm going to over-direct straight up, but I'm going to over-direct to the center. And again, I don't have to use any of the sides. They've already been cut. I have a guide right here in the center. I see my guide. I'm going to cut straight across. And all I'm doing is creating a flat layer that is over-directed to the center.
Jason, would you also call that kind of layering like a square layer?
Yes, you could, yes. A square layer basically just means that you're creating flatness to it. You're creating one side and another side, okay? We call it flat too because you're cutting it straight across, and that would be flat. Just like if you were cutting a flat top. A flat top could be considered square as well.
And so, is it a stationary guide or is it moving?
This is a stationary guide. Again, in the past, we used to call this a triangular layer because if we over-directed everything to the center, we create a triangle. But a lot of times we talk about using these shapes, and most shapes are interpreted in where they fall on the head. So if it's shorter in the front and longer in the back, we would consider that round. If it was shorter in the back and longer in the front, we would consider that triangular. And if it was equal on all sides, we consider that square. So it gets confusing when you say square layer, round layer, triangular layer. We end up really falling into a trap because we just need to translate what a person wants. They can say anything they want. If one of my guests came in and said, yes, can I get a square bob? I have to translate what she's saying because I don't know if she's a beauty professional. I don't know if she went to school. I'd have to ask her those things, but really I need to find out what school of thought did she come from? Not what school did she come from, because I don't know her teachers. Her teachers might have used a different language than I, so I have to say, all right, what does she mean by square? Rather than saying, oh, I understand a square layer. So where some of us, I was taught pivot point when I originally learned, and then as I became a professional and I started working for Paul Paul Mitchell, and Bex went to the Paul Mitchell School here in Schenectady. We go Schenectady. We started to learn a common language, and that common language was 3 basic haircutting techniques, and that's 1 length, layering, and graduation. And then we learned 3 basic shapes, and that's triangular, square, and round. And when you put those 3 together, you have 9 basic shapes that you can create. Those 9 basic shapes, we call it core in Paul Mitchell. Pivot Point calls it something totally different. No, but Al Sassoon calls it something totally different. So really, we understand all those languages. It's just trying to put them all together and speak a universal language. So I'm just going to continue again, because this is a stationary guide, I can condense it. So I just pinched everything together, over-directed it, cut this straight across, and what I'm going to get is that concavity. So you can actually see, I'll bring this a little closer before I pass it off to Bex. You can see what's happened in that top is I'm creating some volume there just by the release of the weight that's in that area. It happens to be the weight from the weight, so it gives it a little bit of volume, but then you're going to see a concavity that's starting to happen here. And what Bex is going to do is she's going to take this and she's going to show you how to attach the rest of it, but keep it also disconnected so that you don't get that mulletous look where the top is just short and the bottom just gets super skinny.
Jason, for somebody that wants to leave their length, like not touch it, do you start with the layering then?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't want to freak anybody out and just start cutting off some inches in the perimeter of the haircut.
So one of the things that, Bex just said that if someone wants to keep their length, you don't want to immediately start to go right here to the base and go, oh, how are the kids? Are you guys back in school yet? Because what they'll do is they'll go, oh, she's cutting length, she's cutting length, she's cutting length. And the
how much is she cutting? How much is she cutting?
Exactly. How much is on the floor? How much is on the floor? Now she's not even focusing in the mirror. She's looking on the floor. Now you're going to cut one side shorter than the other one. Yeah, they're shooting the hair off the cape, and they want to see how much is going on the floor. They won't let you sweep it up until the end. We have to make sure that we understand that there's a psychology to what we're doing. That psychology is showing us that if I'm going to cut somebody's hair, I need to understand what this haircut's going to do to their feelings. I like to say that we don't cut hair to make people look beautiful. We cut hair to make people feel beautiful, because we could walk out on the street right now and go, oh, I don't like her haircut. Oh, I don't like his haircut. Oh, I don't like his beard. It's all subjective, because if I love the person who cuts my beard, that's me. I do have some self-love. But I have to know that if I'm going to be working on somebody, I have to think about how this makes them feel, because at the end of it, they're going to look in the mirror and say, oh my goodness, this feels great. And then they have to know that they're going to go home and be able to do the same exact thing when they style it for us.
So what I'm going to do is just, Jason did such a great job establishing the layers into the haircut. I'm going to kind of bring it back down to the foundations and really clean up the lines. I do believe that you should always have some strength in the haircut, and having it very triangular and a long haircut is essentially a mullet. So we want to make sure that Lindsay here today is not rocking a mullet and she's rocking a strong, cool-ass shag.
Absolutely. And again, just so you guys know out there that are watching this live or are going to be watching it later after it's recorded, we did not rehearse this. This is just something where we came in today, we wanted to do something fun. We wanted to do something virtual. We wanted to do something that was really unrehearsed and not planned, because this is salon reality. This guest just walked in and said, oh, I want a long shag. So we just said, oh, well, how would we deal with that? How would we deal with someone that walks into our doors and says, I'm looking for something new because I haven't had a haircut in 6 months. I haven't had a haircut in 4 months. How do we deal with that? We don't just say, oh, well, I have the perfect thing because what I've been doing in quarantine is sitting down and watching YouTube all day. What we have to do is say, I know how to cut hair. I know how to style hair. So therefore, I'm going to translate what it is that you need, and I'm going to give you what you want in the end that makes you feel like it's the best shag for you, rather than picking out a pin and saying, this is the haircut that I want. You're saying, these are my inspiration, work your magic. And that's what most people do when they trust their hairstylist, is they say, here's my inspiration, please do what you do to make it look the best that it can possibly look with what I have on my head.
And then, of course, when you finish, you're like, this looks way better than Jennifer Aniston's haircut.
Absolutely. And if you know anything about Jennifer Aniston, she actually hated that haircut because it was something that was just fell into place, and it fell with those 3 different layers that people call layers. It's just because it was a haircut that was cut even. And when you cut haircuts even, they end up with disconnections. And those disconnections, again, are from the parietal ridge or in the recession area, and then it drops down, and then there's another disconnection over the ear, and then there's another disconnection, which is the overall length. So we don't want to trick people and make them think that, oh, well, this is the haircut you asked for because this is your hair, and your hair is, you don't have a good hairline. We want to make sure that we understand how to blend those together, because if we think of it as disconnection, we cut the weight is the weight, the width is the width, and the length is the length, you're going to get the look that you're looking for based on architecture, not on artistry.
And that is one thing that I think as professionals, what we have to do to continue to make that person that's in our chair feel really valued is to not blame why something isn't working based on their hairline or their hair density. It's really important to kind of articulate what you're saying to them and figure out a better way to get the result that they want, or to create a plan or a hair journey, as I like to say, to create what their overall outcome of their hair they want over, 2 to 3 haircuts, because you're not always going to get exactly what you want, especially if you're fixing something.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's some of the things that we're running into in the salon right now, is that, these guests of ours, they're coming back from really being on a hiatus. We're seeing a lot of 3-inch roots. So people are trying to debate whether, do I go gray? Do I let it go gray? Or do I let you make me gray? And there's a lot of appointments that need to be taken in there. Sometimes you can do it in one shot, but that has to take a stronger consultation over the phone. And if you have a receptionist and this guest has not talked to their stylist, it's hard to ask all those pertinent questions that really are going to give you the best look in the end. And you have to ask 4 questions that lead you to the results that you're getting. But it's hard to see, sight unseen. So when these guests come in, we're going to say, all right, step 1, this is what we have to do. Step 2, I'm going to be able to get you closer. Step 3, I'm going to get you even closer. And sometimes it's miraculous. You get step 1, you're like, oh my goodness, guess what? That was so easy to erase that color. Now we can go right to step 2, and we can do it today. More often than not, step 1 requires a little bit of softening in between so that you don't go so far. A lot of hairdressers go too far too fast, and it creates a shock to the guest. And that guest, even though they had a picture in their head, they didn't have a picture of them, being ready for that. I like to talk about me jumping out of an airplane. Years ago, I went skydiving, and I actually have a fear of heights. So when I was on the plane and I wanted to jump out, I had to actually visualize myself landing on the ground and going, I made it. I'm still alive. Or I would have never done it. To this day, I own a salon, and the roof is only 2 stories high, and every time I get on a ladder, I get up to about 10 feet and I start to shake. My knees start to wobble because I have a fear of heights. But I had to visualize jumping out of a plane at 13,000 feet and actually landing on the ground and knowing, oh my goodness, the parachute did open. It was going to save me, and that gets us over that fear.
That's so true. And we've all had fears once upon a time in our lives, and sometimes one of those fears would be putting long layers in someone's hair. Like, where do I go from here? And how do I even cut a straight line? So what I'm doing is cutting a nice straight line on our girl Lindsay. I'm establishing some strength in her length, which is what Jason was describing earlier. You have your weight, your height, and your length. So I'm addressing that length right now and just taking it nice and square. Lindsay obviously has no shoulders today, which can be a little bit of a challenge, especially if you are doing woodwork, and I was during quarantine. And that was one of the things that I came in to, like, as, you know, a discovery. As like, oh, this wig does not have shoulders right now. How am I gonna make this wig look beautiful for my guest? So, and the secret to that is you have your husband try it on.
I want to see that video.
So what I did, because what we would do on on a real human is you would want to tilt their head forward, so that way the curvature of their neck can flatten, and that way you can cut a nice clean length to begin. And then you want to take just a little bit of section from that previous cut length in the back to make sure that the sides are nice and square, because as Jason was describing earlier, like a lot of the times we just like push the guest's hair forward, like look at all your length, it's beautiful, but we're really just taking that triangle from the back and pushing it forward. So to establish real strength and to get that real fullness and that shag, you want to make sure that you have that strength carried throughout.
See, and I think that's a perfect thing, because Bex is doing this the perfect way. I like to cut corners a lot of times, and I don't mean cut corners literally. I mean cut corners by making a shortcut, and that shortcut sometimes is I can imagine where my length is going to be, so therefore I'll jump to it. Bex has a training program here, and when she teaches the right way, and the right way is not always my architectural way, because if I've done something over and over and over again, I know that I'm not going to make the mistake when I make the shortcut, but it's understanding that you have to know the rules before you break them. So understanding the rules, she's teaching it the right way. I would actually visually do it the wrong way, but when I get to a teaching part, I would say, all right, here's how I want you to do it, because this is what's going to give you the end result that you'll see, and you can't make the mistake, because now she understands that length. That length is going to always be there, so when she connects her width and her weight to that length, she's not going to cut her length off. It's not going to get skinny. We need it to still have some fullness down there. So she's not going to over-direct and elevate that bottom too high, because if she does, she's going to lose the strength of that length.
Jason, what are some haircuts that you're seeing in the salon that people are looking for right now?
Well, you know what? The biggest thing that I'm seeing right now is that people are starting to feel comfortable with this longer thing. I'm talking even people with very short hair. I mean, you think about
the long pixie.
Exactly. So even your haircut, you're typically a lot shorter than this. If you can see Bex, her logo on her shirt. This is her famous bowl haircut. The bowl haircut came back a little while ago, but that was before COVID. Now you can't wear a bowl haircut because the bowl would cover your eyes.
Yeah, I know.
It's way too long. So what you have to do is you have to grow it up a little bit longer, push it away from the face, so it's a little bit longer than what we're used to seeing her in. But that's what we're seeing, is we're seeing people getting comfortable with a little bit longer than what they were. So we have to be ready with the tools to tell them, all right, here's how you can style your hair during this transition. Because most of us are in that transition. Some people will go back to their original style. They'll go back to that pixie haircut. They'll go back to that short shag rather than being in this long shag, because sometimes they'll say, oh, it's just too hot. Now, they don't say that here in upstate New York, but most of the time that's going to be in California, or it's going to be down in Florida, it's going to be in South Carolina. We need to be ready for all of that. We need to be ready for our guests that are coming back from these other states that might have given them that ability to pull their hair out of their face, and now they want to wear something that's getting them ready for fall, that's getting them ready for winter. So it's just being prepared.
Tag her up.
All right. So I'm getting tagged back in, and most of the time I wasn't even paying attention to what she was doing, but I'm going to look and I'm going to assess what the next step is to this haircut. So I'm going to look and see that what we've done is we've started off starting to shag that out, and we're getting some fullness in this area that you would normally not see when you just layer this straight up and down. If we layer this straight up and down, which means that we took the length and we over-directed that, it would get skinnier on the bottom. We didn't want that skinnier on the bottom, and what Bex did is she went in here and cut that blunt. When she cut that blunt, it gave me an idea of how much weight I can remove in here, but I don't want to do that with a traditional layer. I can do it a couple of different ways. I can do it by over-direction, so if I want to make it stronger here in the front, I can over-direct it back. I can go inside and create internal layers, which some people call them invisible layers, which is actually graduation. Whenever you cut something that's shorter on the bottom and longer on the top, you're graduating the hair. It just happens to be called invisible layers because they're hidden on the inside and they create a softness that's there. So I'm going to actually go in and create some invisible layers.
We love when Jason busts out some razors and some techniques, because he is the master of techniques, which is what I love. Every time he comes here, I learn something new, as we all should be learning something new every single day, if we can.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and again separate the width right at the occipital bone, and I'm going to go directly around from ear to ear, because what that does, that maintains that length. Again, you have to understand where the length comes from. So when we speak of length, most of the time we think, oh, how long do you want it? Well, when I speak of length, I'm saying, where do you want your length to fall, and how thick do you want your length, or how skinny do you want your length? So I know that layering as a technique is going to make anything skinnier. So if I layer the weight, it's going to make the weight skinnier, which also just removes the weight in the weight. If I go to the width and I layer that, it's going to make the width skinnier. If I layer the length, it's going to make the length skinnier. So it's not always just saying, oh, how long do you want it and how many layers do you want? It's understanding that if I'm working in all these separate areas, if I work in the front, what am I doing to the front? If I work in the back, what am I doing to the back? Then I connect them all together. Once I connect them all together, I'll know. I'll pull this mask off once again.
So funny teaching him math.
So I'm going to start off by giving myself a sort of a guide for what I'm going to do in the next technique. And I'm going to start off by using a scissor or a shear. And I'm going to, again, raise this hair up. And what this is going to show me is that disconnection. So the mid shaft of this, or the width of this, is actually longer than what we cut on the top. I need to understand that, because if I just go ahead and cut that off, I just made the width skinnier. I don't want to do that. That disconnection is going to help me because of how high I elevated it. Now I just want to blend the two. So I have to understand that if I go inside here and I start to open and close my shears like this, and I use, we could call this channel cutting, we could call this effilating, you can call it a bunch of different names. Again, we have to understand, how are we translating this? What is this going to do for us? And then I'm going to switch to a tool that is one of my favorites. In fact, I don't have my chopstick with a blade in it just yet.
You want me to pull it out on my top?
Please do. Because I just got back from traveling. When you travel, you can't have your razors with blades in them. So whenever I'm on a plane, I have to make sure that even though my scissor case comes with me, you can't have razors in your tools. So I'm going from the mid shaft here, and I'm just kind of opening and closing in and out. Well, I can use a razor and get that same effect.
So would you call that technique slithering then?
You can call it slithering, yep. You can call it slithering, you can call it effilating.
Oh, I like effilating.
You can call it channel cutting because you're using the channel of the shear. So the channel of the shear is here, and you never close all the way. If you close all the way, you're going to take off all of the weight. You're going to remove all of that bulk. The faster you go, the faster you can go this way. The slower you go, the slower you should go, because even though it's called slithering, some people would say this is slide cutting. If you're not moving fast enough and you start to slide cut, if your shears are not sharp enough, you could start pulling on the hair. And again, we have to think about how this feels. And how many times does a person say to you, oh, I loved how my haircut felt? No, they love how the shampoo felt, they love how the blow dry felt, they love the massage, but they don't ever tell you, oh, that haircut felt good. But what you want to make sure that they understand is, you know what? I love looking at your techniques. I love watching your body position, because if they see you in the right position and you look comfortable, then they're going to be comfortable. They can just relax. And when they relax and close their eyes and you start to do this, and it just feels like, oh my goodness, like you're just massaging on my head. It's like you're sprinkling something on my head. They don't even have to know. So it's really important that you pay attention. That means when I have a sharp blade in my tool, I'm not going to be pulling on them. And Bex and I know, for traveling around the country for years and years with Donald Scott NYC, we've understood that if you don't put sharp blades, or you don't have sharp blades in your tools, you can start to hear that pull. And that's what the misconception, misrepresentation of razors do, because it causes people to think that it was the razor that did that to them, when really it was poor technique. It was someone using a dull razor, or someone using poor technique and their angle was off. We need to make sure that we not only have a tool, a great tool, we have a great technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in. What's that? It'll be fine.
I'm going to go fill up some water, because I'll be a lifelong assistant.
She won't complain that much. All right, so I'm going to take my chopstick. It's one of my favorite tools right now to use in the salon and at shows. I'm not doing any shows right now, so it's become my favorite tool in the salon, because it really cuts down on my time. When I have a limited amount of time to work on somebody, I can cut those corners to make sure that I have the full amount of time so that I can style this person. I've done these haircuts thousands of times, so therefore I should be able to knock them out in minutes rather than hours. The overall service could take me 45 minutes, it could take me an hour, but I want to make sure that person knows how to style their hair. I want to know that person knows that they have options with this hairstyle. The haircut, minimize it. Minimize the amount of time you take on the haircut, and maximize the amount of time that you're giving them on the finish, because that's the only thing they can recreate at home. They can't recreate their color at home. No, they can't recreate their haircut at home. What they can recreate is the style. So I'm going to go in with my chopstick and do the same exact thing that I did with my shear or scissor, but I'm just going to change a little bit of an angle. I'm going to tilt my chopstick to one side, and I'm just going to go in and slowly release some of that weight. When I release that weight, I'm going to peel back my fingers. When I peel back my fingers, I'm releasing the weight, and it tells me to move to the next section. And each time I do that, I'm removing weight from the inside of the width. So when I do that, I'm creating layers, but they're invisible because I'm cutting from the underneath. And what you'll notice is that gives me volume. That volume comes from inside because I did what's called graduation, but it's mimicking graduation. It's actually long layers, but they're inside. When you put shorter hairs under longer hairs, it will give you the volume that you're looking for. Again, I use my chopstick as a parting tool or a sectioning tool. Sometimes it's much easier than using a comb, especially on long hair. You can get tangled. So again, I'm going to go back in and do the same exact thing that I did with my shears. Go to the midsection, and this is all dictated by the person's texture. If the person has big woolly hair, you're able to go a little bit deeper on the haircut. If their hair is very fine or thin, if some people would say, you actually want to start towards the ends because you don't want to take out too much weight from the interior. If you do, then you have no support in that style. Worst things that we do when it comes to haircutting is make the ends too thin, and therefore that's when a person says, oh, it made my hair fly away. The razor made my hair, made it frizzy. Well, you're not going to see any frizziness in this finished style because we're putting all of this internal movement on the inside, and I'm making sure that I'm using a sharp tool, and I'm also making sure that I use proper technique. You'll notice that everything is done with one stroke. That one stroke maintains the integrity of the hair, because if I keep going back and forth, I just keep whittling and going in and taking out all that weight from the inside, which makes the ends look very skinny. One of the things that you'll notice is that I stopped at the ear. If I stop at the ear, that means that I'm not going to take any weight from the width of the front because that's where people are mostly lacking. I'm going to use a different technique for that. You can see just by removing that weight from the inside, I'm just going to shake this out. We would never do this with a guest unless you really, really, really don't like her. You don't want her back.
Or if you do headstand.
Okay, so when I bring this back down, you'll see all of that volume that we've created in here. Now, we're obviously going to be able to get some more movement in there, but I didn't go into that weight yet. We're going to wait that for the drop. Why? Because wet hair lies, and once you see how much weight needs to be removed from the top, we can go in and do this dry in the refinement. That will be able to see how much it needs to be lifted off of that top. But you can start to see this shape evolve. You can start to see the shortest length is here, and it starts to come back in this area, and I connected it with what I was with here. I had a visual from the front, and that's where I started my internal layers. I started from the mid shaft because I knew where it was. Again, if this hair was much thicker, I could go in a little deeper, but I don't want her ends to get thin. That's established that strength. You can still see that right across my wrist. You can still see the strength there because I did not lift that length up and put any internal layers in there, so I did not remove any weight from there. All right? So the next thing I'm going to do is connect her weight to her width and the sides. I'm going to use a different technique for that. I'm going to do one technique on one side, and on the other side, I'm going to use my chopstick as well, just to show you that you can convert. You can go from shears on one side, and you can go from, I keep on forgetting about you guys over there, I'm so sorry. There's a camera that's closer to me, so I keep on focusing on that. But I'm going to use my chopstick on one side, I'm going to use my shears on another side, because I'm going to show you that it's really not about the tool you're using, it's about the technique. And if you use proper technique, doesn't matter, I joke about it on stage, I say you can use a sharp stone if that's popular at the time.
I do think it's important to, like, when you're talking about what razor you're using on what kind of hair, like whether it be wet or dry. I was trained by using a straight razor, so I do feel like using a straight razor on dry hair is not always the best tool to use on dry hair, even if it is prepared, flat ironed, all of that, and really ready. The having the texture in a raised razor really helps with bringing the hair, like parting the hair away, if that makes sense for all of the hairdressers on here, or anyone that does get a haircut with a razor.
All right, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to take a clue from the weight of the hair, and I know that it stops at the recession area. So if I just comb this hair down, I can see where it stops. It stops right exactly where my parting stopped. I'm going to connect the two, but I'm going to over-direct this a little bit forward, slightly forward, and I'm going to section from right behind the ear, from the high point to right behind the ear. I'm going to take all of this in one section. My elevation has to be low because I want to maintain the length. If I know that my length is directly over the top of the ear, then I don't want to go back into this too far. So keep my elevation low. I keep my elevation low, that maintains the integrity or the strength here. If I were to attach this way out here, it gets too thin and it just goes straight back. I want it to come down like this and keep that same exact angle that my width or that my weight was created, and I don't want to lose any of the width of this haircut because that's where most people turn the shag into a mullet. Mm-hmm. It becomes, business in the front, party in the back, when the reality is this person wants party all over. They want the length all over, so it's not just
the movement all over.
So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a technique. And this technique is called stroking. Stroking is just opening your shears and closing them, but closing them all the way now because I want to get some bluntness there. So I'm going to come down. I have a guide, and I'm just going to open my shears, and then I'm just going to close them on the way out. Close them on the way out, close them on the way out. If I close them on the way out, what you'll notice is that I'm just going to be taking off bits and pieces as I move down, but I'm not taking off any of the overall length. So what that did is that creates that same shape. So I just follow that. And again, because I understand body position, it's just like when I'm using body position when I use a razor. On the other side, you'll notice that when I use my razor, I'm just gonna follow that same line, just like this. Well, if I'm stroking and I'm following that same line, all I'm doing is following my hands going down. Naturally, I'm gonna come away from the face so it maintains the length. If you follow your body positioning, you're gonna do the same thing every time. When we cut with clippers, we do the opposite. When we wanna fade, we go like this and we naturally fade away from the head. Too many people try to get close and they try to follow the head form and then everything becomes round. Well, we know in most short shapes, they're going to look better when they have some volume up top. So you're actually creating layering into graduation, and that's what a fade actually is. So it's understanding your body position. Moving your hand up this way with a clipper, moving your hand down this way with a shear if we're slide cutting, or if we're using a razor and we're slicing through that. So I'll move to the opposite side. I'm gonna do the same exact thing, but I'm gonna swap out a tool. And this becomes just as easy. The cool thing about using a razor doing this technique is that using one side, it's the same exact thing as the other side, except for the only thing you do is you change your fingers and you point them down. If you're right-handed and you're on the left side, you'll actually point them down this way and you'll cut behind it. And when you come to the right side, you'll flip it up and you cut down here. That way you're in a proper position on both sides. It gives you the ability to do this both sides exactly the same. When you're using a shear, it's harder because one side is comfortable for you, and then the next side you have to come over the top, and you're cutting from over the shoulder, and sometimes you just visually don't get the same thing. So I like to switch to a razor. You don't necessarily use one side with a shear and the other side with a razor, but I like to show that it's not the tool, it's using proper technique so that a person can't say, oh, the razor did it. Well, if you use dog clippers, the dog clippers did it? No, it just means you use improper body positioning or improper technique. So now I'm going to have my fingers pointing down. I'm going to take my chopstick and I'm just going to glide straight through, maintaining the overall length, but taking off and seeing exactly where that follows. I'm going to do the same exact thing, following that line, straight down. You'll notice that I'm not using this herky-jerky action. If I do, then I'm just going to keep whittling away, and if I use improper pressure, I'm going to be cutting off that corner. I want to leave that corner so that I've maintained their overall length, and now I've done the same exact thing on both sides. So again, if you look at that, you'll notice that she has the same exact look on both sides. Same exact on both sides. She's very happy. You happy? Yes. Very happy.
She's smiling. She doesn't, yeah.
Bex, you want anything to add to that?
No, I think it's looking gorgeous. Jason, would you now dry it and then finish your cup to dry?
Absolutely.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and dry the mannequin, and then we're going to talk about adding some bits and pieces of extracurricular stuff. So this is where you would put in your fringe. If we're talking about using a curtain bang, if we're talking about putting, stamping in a strong fringe, this is where you would make up your mind. But you don't have to make up your mind right away. This guest might still be thinking, I'm not sure about the bangs. We could say, all right, well, maybe I'll give you a curtain bang today, and then the next time you come in, we can actually blunt it up a little bit more. We can make sure that it just frames the eyebrows a little bit, or make sure it frames the face. We could cut it into a point so you can wear it to either side. So really, we want to think about giving this person the options that they'll have down the road.
And then Jason, would you stylists, I've been seeing him on Instagram quite a bit, which I've been loving, all of the shag haircuts. Would you dry it smooth so you can check the haircut first,
Yes,
and then add the texture back in,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And then also what that does, that gives this person options. So you can change their style wardrobe. You can put in a product that's going to give them volume after you've smoothed it out. Once you smooth it out, you're going to be able to see exactly where all your lines fall. You're gonna be able to, really go in and refine the haircut, and then you can give them the option. So they get to see it smooth before you're finished with the style, before you're finished with the haircut, and then you can give them the option, okay, you can wear it like this, or you can actually wear it like that. So it gives you multiple ways of wearing the hairstyle.
So fun.
This one just says poor connection, so we're gonna jump back on.
Cool. I know, I think. Oh, yeah.
We're live again, so.
Instagram only allows us like an hour to go live. I've realized from quarantine. Yours did too.
Did it?
Not one, yeah.
It's okay. All right.
We'll just go back on.
I'm attempting to go back live again, so those of you that are still on this, I'll be jumping back on the AJC Salon Live as well. Hope everyone's enjoying what we're doing. I see a bunch of people watching. Hello, Patter. Hey, you're in the backyard. You're watching us from the backyard. You're supposed to be working.
He wants a haircut, actually.
So, those of you out there that have any questions, please get those questions rolling, and Bex and I will sit down after we're done with the video, and we'll try to answer any questions that we can. It's hard to do this live because we want you to make sure that you see the content, but we'll try to get some of them, answer some of them live, and we'll do the rest in post. All right, we're back live again.
Jason, did you have any crazy challenges with any experiences since you reopened that have been oh my goodness, this is heavy, or
hopefully she's not watching, but I had a guest come into the salon that was really adamant about getting back in as soon as we opened. And I wondered why. I hadn't seen her. She actually lives in my town as well. And hadn't seen her in almost 4 months. And she has short hair, probably your length.
okay.
And she decided, like a lot of our guests do, and she wasn't following our Instagram or following the salon's webpage or our Facebook page, and she didn't know that we had options of telling them how to style their hair, telling them how to get through the pandemic. So she just went on her own and went out and bought some hair color, and I color her a 5 VR, a 5 violet red. And she decided she wanted to be blonde for her.
Ah.
Yeah, so she wanted to go from a 5 VR to a 9G because she thought that a nice strawberry blonde would look good on her. And she just went out and put on her 3-inch roots, she went out and put I think a 9G or a 9N or 9 something. Who knows? She bought it in a box. And when she came in, she had a 1/2 inch of white hair because I put her 5 VR with a little bit of N over it to cover her gray hair. So she has a 1/2 inch of gray hair, and then she had almost 3 inches of a level 9 was very copper gold because it picked up some of the copper because it didn't lighten her enough where she does have some.
What's her starting level?
Well, her base level was about a 5.
Okay.
Her natural level was about a 5, but she was about 80% white. So she had white hair mixed with, and it was whiter in the front, it was darker in the back. So it takes an expert to figure out what formulations you're supposed to put in there. I know I said 5BR, but we do formulas that add a little bit to this area, add a little bit more to this area. So I actually do 2 different formulas on her. So straight 5BR in the back because I know that I have some contributing pigment. There's going to be a natural canvas level or a natural level, and then in the front I have to deal with the more gray or more white hair. So now I'm telling her, that retouch that you thought you were getting now turned into a corrected color. So she ends up spending 3.5, almost 4 hours to color hair that is really only 5.5 inches long, but it's red on the ends. It still has a violet red, and then it's on her mid shaft. She's a blonde, and then on her root she's white. So you have to deal with all of those aspects differently. So that was probably the worst one that I had to deal with because most of my stylists or most of my guests do follow me on Instagram or they follow me on Facebook. So they got tips and pointers throughout the pandemic, and we told them, if you have to do something, let us talk you through it. Let us get you to an area where you feel comfortable doing it. We gave them styling tips to hide their grays. They could come in and get dry shampoo that had some coloring in it. We made sure that they knew. She just wasn't aware of that and went ahead and did it on her own. So that was a huge learning lesson for her. And it hit her in the pocketbook.
Yep. Did you do any virtual haircuts while we were shut down?
I did quite a few. We did a lot of videos early on because we wanted to make sure that people were staying high on their skill level. My staff and I, during the pandemic, while we were shut down, we trained every single week. Every single Monday, we had 3 of us come into the salon. We social distance. The rest of them were at home, so we did Zoom meetings. It was very critical because a lot of times when you have stuff going on like this, you tend to get down on yourself. You tend to forget a lot of the lessons that we've been going over through years of training. And then all of a sudden, you're just with nothing. You're left with nothing. I kept telling everybody, this is the longest I've ever been without work since I was 14 years old. And it was a long time. And we were closed for 14 weeks, so it made a big difference once it was all said and done to actually train through a good 12 weeks of that until we got back in. And this was while painting and while changing the interior of the salon. So it's good to be back. It's actually good to be back out here too because this is where I get my inspiration from. I came in today into BEX Salon and I was able to see her in her training program, and it always makes me feel good because she calls me her mentor. And to have someone that is a great learner, sit there and listen, and when I hear her teaching about some of the things that we've talked about over the years, it makes me feel good as an educator. It makes me feel great as a partner to her in education. So we feed off each other. So hopefully you guys can notice that our passion and our excitement about this industry is next to none. It's always at a high level, and we're trying to get it back up to where we were before the pandemic hit.
No better way than collaborating with you, Jay.
How's everybody doing over here? I'm going to wave at a couple of people. All right. So one of the things that I love about seeing Beth's work, she's really a master at finishing. And I think that says a lot about a stylist. A lot of times you have people that will learn how to cut hair really well, and then they lose all the finish work because they're constantly trying to make things perfect. And they think they make this perfect haircut, but then they don't know how to finish it. They don't know how to style it. So they constantly work at making things perfectly even, and then when the person goes home and they style it, they they have no idea how to style it themselves because you wasted all your time doing the haircut. She's the best at wrapping those two together. So I love watching her finish work. Sometimes I wish I had someone as skilled as her, as my partner in the salon to finish my work for me because I know I can walk away and it would come out just like I wanted it. And that's great. And that's what we try to do in our training program is have our young kids finish hair as well as they cut hair. And they're constantly practicing and cutting hair, practically picking up the mannequins. I think it's really a key point is to learn how to finish hair first. Learn how to shampoo hair absolutely first, and then learn how to finish hair.
And two, I know that by finishing this hair with the blow dryer and my mason and, taking it section by section, drying the roots first, then chop, and then the ends, I know that I can cut it afterwards, make sure that it's exactly where it needs to be. Then I can tell her to go home and air dry it tomorrow, and I know that the shape is like where it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
So I think that's another important point to make. Lindsay better go out tonight.
She's going to have a live session in Schenectady, New York.
Right.
It's looking great.
Gorgeous. The layers in the front are perfect.
So I think once we add a little bit of, extra to that fringe, I think it'll be just straight out of the Pinterest pages.
Yes, even better. The Jason and BEX cut.
It's the collaboration cut.
I know, it's fun like working on an actual haircut together.
Yep.
Normally we have our own models.
And we're constantly sneaking a peek. Normally we're socially distanced on stage, and I'm looking over at, peeping at her work, and then she'll look over and peep at my work, and give each other a compliment here and there, but we really can't see what we're doing. This way we've actually watched each other do the work. We listen to the words that we've spoken 1,000 times to each other, but it's good to actually work on it in tandem and actually see it come together and know that, wow, two people can cut one head of hair and make it look absolutely as if one master did it. So Max, what do you think is the most important thing when it comes to doing a proper blow dry?
The most important thing I would say when doing a proper blow dry is truly like drying in sections. So you want to really make sure that you're drying that root first. Because if you move on to the end for the mid chop and that root is not completely dry, what's going to happen when that person leaves the salon and it's humid, it's going to frizz up. It's not, you're not even going to be able to take a good after picture, really. So I think that that's probably one of the most important things. And then, of course, proper sectioning as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important that we pay attention to this because when we're blowing dry, we need to tell our guests that we are drawing it this way. If we don't say we're drying the roots first, they just think, they can flip their head over and everything's going to fall into shape. But if we're trying to give them volume, we can teach them that if you're going to flip your head over, you have to think about the roots first. You can't just blow the dryer in there, shake it up, and all of a sudden flip back over and everything's in place.
Yep.
If you do a proper haircut and you do a proper dry cut, it will fall into place, but it'll be a reasonable facsimile than if you were to blow it dry properly and teach them that.
Yes, and to every single one of my guests that come in, especially if it's their first time with me, they're learning how to, like some blow dry tips, they're not going to know exactly how to get a perfect blow dry without practicing quite a bit, but you always want to make sure that you're educating even when you're behind the chair. I think that's absolutely key. And too, like, I had someone the other day that was like, I just put my head upside down and dry my hair that way, which is fine. Like, go ahead, do that. But you want to make sure that you're using your hands as a brush and still getting into the hair when it's, you know, when you're upside down to make sure that you're getting that root, getting that mid shaft, and then bring it back up to finish the end, you know?
Yeah, I think when you have a guest that flips their head upside down, you can really showing them that I understand you're going to do this at home. I understand that you're going to actually make this this easier move. You're going to condense your time. You're going to shorten the time that you're spending on it. But if you don't put your product in the right way, you know, you don't comb it through, you're not going to be able to see the end result the way you saw it leave out of the salon. So it's important that we use our dialogue with them and make sure that you tell them, I know you're going to do this, so here's how I want you to do it, you know, using it the right way. I teach my guests how to hold onto their dryer so that they're facing the nozzle the easiest way so they can get volume, so that even if they flip their head over, they're actually blowing hair upwards rather than just flipping over and blowing the hair back to their scalp. Because a lot of times that will actually create a flatter top piece. And you can see the volume that BEX is creating here. And it's really just by proper blow dries, by using over direction. It's kind of like putting rollers in the hair. If you put them on base, you're going to get more volume. So she was actually using an on base over direction with a brush, even though it's a flat brush. She's actually over directing and using that natural body position to give that volume there.
And then, of course, you want to finish with cool air at the end. That helps seal the cuticle, just like a cool water would at the sink. But what I did notice is when you are blow drying hair, you're noticing some of the imperfections in the haircut. So obviously we do need to go through and check the haircut, make sure. Like I always say, there's like 2 haircuts involved when I'm giving a haircut. There's the wet haircut, and then, you know, it's only halfway over after it's dry, really.
Absolutely.
Jason, do you want to go in?
No, I'm going to have you go ahead and do some finish work, and then I'm just going to step in at the very last, and I'm just going to put the fringe in and really put the stamp on this haircut. Again, to show you the overall look, there's a lot of versatility to it. We didn't cut off the majority of the length. You can see the length is nice and strong still, and that gives you a lot of options when it comes to it. You don't have to hide behind having that length there. She still has length in the front, which is great. We didn't chop off her length in the front, which a lot of hairdressers will go in and do because they don't understand that everything doesn't have to be connected. This hair has 3 different areas that are cut in 3 different areas. Therefore, Becca dried it in 3 different areas. She went from the top first because that's what she wanted the volume. Then she went in and blew dry the mid shaft. You know, the bottom or the length was dried at first just to give a little bit of volume in that bottom, but just it was to give support to the top.
Yes.
So now she's going to go in and do some refinement work.
I'm going to let the length drop out, and I'm going to clean up those corners. Because what I was noticing after it was dry, right, Jason was like, okay, why does the base still look so stringy and dull? And it was obviously there was still hair in there that didn't serve the haircut any longer.
And that's why it's important to go ahead and have those 2 different relationships with the hair, one wet and one dry. Because once you see it dry, you can see if anything needs to be removed. That doesn't mean that everything you just go and blend everything together. Sometimes you have to go in and remove a little bit more weight. Sometimes it's just refinement on the ends to make sure that if this person's round brushing, they're not snagging onto one hair and creating a really uncomfortable feeling when they're blowing it dry at home. So really what she's doing is just going in and making sure that she's connecting those disconnections, but not making them so blunt.
Yeah, we definitely want to create nice softness within the disconnections. Like these guys, obviously, they don't need to be there anymore because it's not providing any strength within the shaft haircut either.
basically a conduit. It's actually taking a look, and you'll notice that she's over directing, and then you allow the length to drop out. Once that length drops out, she knows she's not making that length skinny anymore. That allows that to be nice and strong. She put bluntness in there. Now she's creating a softness.
Yeah, because we don't want to overshadow those invisible layers that Jason put in. We want to accentuate them and just, kind of clean up any discrepancies that could still be left behind in the haircut. And especially when you are working with a razor, you do always want to go back in and just make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be using your shear.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that's always impressed me about Bex is her attention to detail. Her attention to detail is far superior than your average hairdresser, and that's why I think she's a master at her own craft.
She's looking good.
She is.
She's looking great.
I like what I see.
All right, I'm excited for what you do next. Are you going to put in some?
All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do is it's something I came up with not too long ago, and again, because I had a lot of free time, as most of us did. I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick the fringe, and I'm going to lift it all up so that I can see. She just said happy birthday to one of my stylists. She is 30. The dirty 30.
Woo!
The dirty 30.
Yes!
So I'm going to go in and I'm going to lift up I'm going to section off her fringe, how deep we want it, how much we want there. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to use a natural technique. And that natural technique is going to be shifting my shears upward and forward to create a natural curtain bang without having to go in and pull everything together and hope that it falls where it's supposed to. So, without further ado, so I'm going to section off. I'm going to use a little bit of a kind of half moon sectioning. Just going to go ahead and push that hair away in the back. Sometimes I'll actually grab behind the ear and pull that. And I have this fringe now. And to create this curtain bang, I'm just going to direct everything up. And I'm going to use my shears. I'm going to start off in the center. And I know where I want them to fall. I want them to fall right around the bridge of the nose. If I want to get a visual of that, I can just pull that down. I know that I have to go a little bit further on a mannequin because they will spring up a little bit. So I'll go a little further and I just open up my shears and I just pinch. And when I pinch, I'm creating a little bit of a fringe. Now, typically I don't allow that to drop just yet. I'll leave it right there so that I can see where those hairs are falling. And then I open my shears a little bit wider and I move right above it. And I pinch. And then I move a little bit above it. And then I pinch. And then I move a little bit above it. And then I pinch. And then I move a little bit above it. And then I finally pinch. And what happens is it opens that area up. So now we have a perfect curtain bang that has some movement to it. So I don't have to go back in and do any more refinement. If I want to, I can break it up a little bit more. I can go in and do some slithering. I can actually cut down this way and create a little bit more sharpness to them so that if she styles them, that has a little bit more movement. But I think it's a really cool technique just to grab that section up, start in that center, and I'm just going to start off and pinch, and then I move up, and then I pinch wider, and I move up, and then I pinch wider, I move up, and I pinch wider. And it's just the natural positioning of the shears takes the hair shorter in the center, and as it starts to pinch, it's cutting on the way up, so it's actually making a V, even though the V is here, so it's doing the opposite. So it's actually creating this type of look. And that's just by actually studying my shears and understanding that if I go and I'm working on the hair and I'm moving up and in, I'm going deeper into that section, and I'm actually working up in that direction, so when it falls down, it actually opens right up.
And Jason, that's a technique you created, right?
I did.
You came up with. So another Jason Clemons technique for the books.
I call that the COVID curtain.
COVID curtain.
I just made that up too. I really didn't make that until just now.
Yes.
Thank you guys for watching. We hope that you guys
We call this coping with COVID.
Yeah, we don't sit here to say we're teaching you something. What we want to do is just share what we've amassed over the years of working together and gathering information from each other. It's always good to really touch base with people from around the country. Bex gets to travel down to Austin, Texas, and work on some of the guests that she's had down there over the years. And then she comes back to Schenectady, New York, and really deals with the massive amount of guests that she has here. I travel from Western New York, come out here. I go out to Oregon, and I'm down in Florida, and I'm in Maryland, and we travel all over the country to say hello to the people that we've seen around the world. And I've seen a lot of people on this feed, and we want to thank you guys for joining in and paying attention. And hopefully you've gathered some inspiration, not inspiration, like I said before.
We like to make up words here.
Yes, make up words, make up techniques. It's all fun because in the salon, it's salon reality. We sometimes get into our own little head, and again, we're all artists. But if you want to recreate your work, you have to put some architecture into it. Hopefully, you kind of gathered some of that architecture, and you can add it to your artwork now, and really get creative and use that inspiration. Use some of the techniques that we came up with, and add them to what you're already doing well. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you guys. You
Thank
can
you guys.
follow Jason at AJC Salon. And then, you can follow me where you're following me. Thank you guys.
Take care, guys.
Mwah.
Take care.
Love to everyone. Share it to IGTV.